If we could, where's the microphone? Have we got the? If you were making some very interesting points earlier in our group, and we're just trying to get some feedback from this morning's session about what you've learned this morning.
Okay, well, thank you first for all the presentation, for all the speakers, and also for those who developed that invest also, while maybe you are not here because that is.
We are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are just two of many. So what we present is combined work of many people on the project.
Well, thanks then on behalf of this community present here.
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, the scientific basis of the tool, it's wonderful. I think approaching nature with people, it's nice. But, if it is based on science, it's nicer. And that's it gives some support to them. So far, the invest, it's a wonderful tool for decision making. To tell you, unfortunately, we didn't know about this invest a long time ago because a lot of mistakes have been made. It's difficult to correct now and to destroy all of these coastal areas with the development and all of this planning in cities and all of these things. So the outcome, of the invest, it's, in my point of view, it's very positive. It will guide the decision makers. However, in my point of view, based on the past experience, dealing with such approaches, communities have to be implicated. And other stakeholders, the administration, the decision makers, from the beginning, in my point of view, in the development phase, before the applications, if people may know that this tool is promising, they have to be implicated. I don't know which kind of mechanism should be developed, but if really the application can be successful, it has to be that way. Also, others have to be prepared before presenting that to the decision makers. I can even say it has to come from those people to decision makers, not from the decision makers to these people. So that's very important for the success of the application of this invest tool. I don't know. Did I cover everything or I forgot something?
No, that's great. That's an excellent point, and I completely agree. I think that was something that I tried to touch on only very briefly this morning about an ecosystem assessment being an entire engagement process, and you need to start right from the beginning with communicating with your stakeholders. So that's true. Anybody else got anything to add? Anyone from the marine team? Green pass.
So for the key messages, or the things that you learned from this morning session, to learn about learning and or being informed of new methods for assessing ecosystem services, learning and discussing about the two outcome methods, so both the spatial distribution of ecosystem services changes and both this spider diagram or graph. So we've had a very nice discussion, interesting discussion on both of those outcomes or methods, and the group decided that the spatial distribution of ecosystem services is much more understandable and useful tool. Then the closer networking and knowing the right person to contact if you want to use this kind of tool. then what kind of model exists, both for the terrestrial and the marine type of ecosystems, and about the guidelines and where to look for this kind of information. And finally, about the area itself, so about this case study in particular and the floating boats, because we had no clue about this kind of cultural services. And finally, about the missing things, when we run the model, we felt sorry not to have the ArcGIS in order to see the model running at the end, because we just had black maps at the end.
Thanks, that's great. Well, I think, as Greg was saying, hopefully the Invest software will all be able to run independently of ArcGIS soon. Is that the...
But running, but we showed the only 3.0 version that is independently run. So running was no problem. But to look at the results, you need some kind of GIS.
Okay.
That nobody prepared. But they see results from my computer.
You can download QGIS for free in like 30 minutes online. You can do a search, and that's completely free. And you all invest now. So you search for QGIS, letter Q, GIS.
Okay, that's great. Well, it seems like we've had some feedback kind of from the more process stakeholder side, and we've had some feedback on the more technical mapping side, which is great because both components are really important in all of this. I think unless anybody else has anything in particular to add. Oh, we have another hand.
Yeah, maybe to add from the interpretation side, then when you actually want to work and use the maps in decision making, we also had the point that it's important to be aware of the uncertainties and also the information that might be missing in the maps. For example, stakeholders that are not visible in the map, and certain relationships between where ecosystem services are generated and where are people that depend on these services. So be aware when using such mapping tools that it's not the final information, but that it's only one step towards coming to a conclusion or an agreement among stakeholders what might be a good decision or step forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You've got to be aware of the limitations of your models. I think that's particularly important, I think, as we'll learn this afternoon, when you're dealing with monetary values as well. It can be quite a sensitive issue. And I think that goes back to, again, another point that Greg raised and that I mentioned during the whole process, is that it is iterative as well. So you run a map and then you take it back to the stakeholders and get more information and you run it again. And obviously these kind of things do improve with the more information that you gather. So, good point. Anybody got anything else to throw in? Okay, great. Well, I think I'm going to hand over to Dolph for the last 10 minutes before we have lunch.
Okay, so we're now all experts in Invest. No more questions at this point?
Just to say, Greg and CK are going to be around for the rest of the day, and they'll be around lunchtime if anybody else has any questions. As will be enough if you want to ask generally about sort of assessment technological.
If you can just leave the surveys on the board in the back over there.
Okay, maybe before we forget, let's give a little applause to Greg and CK for their work this morning. They and their team have been working for many years on this tool, and it is improving all the time, but like you say, it's a lot of work. And to be developed further and make it user-friendly and be used in practice, but I know it is being used already in some quite a few situations. I also hope that you not only got some insight in what Invest can do and maybe can not do yet in terms of analyzing trade-offs between ecosystem services, but also that you have some better idea of how the concept of ecosystem services itself can be useful and actually is really important. in making better informed decisions about the conflict between conservation and development. Usually development means that we convert quite productive multifunctional systems like forests and wetlands into monofunctional systems like forests into plantations or wetlands into shrimp farms. And people that are proposing those development changes, they often have more or less hard data on the benefits of making this conversion in terms of increased productivity or increased employment, other economic benefits. But on the other side of the equation, it's much more difficult to show what we were discussing before on our little round table there, the opportunity cost, in this case of the other way around, the opportunity cost of development, meaning losing your natural and multifunctional and quite productive ecosystem in terms of services. I prepared a few slides to illustrate the importance to look at the total picture if you make these trade-off decisions, kind of also as an introduction to the afternoon session, where at the end of the day we both at the personal level but also at the government level we have limited budgets, so we do have to somehow at least turn some of those ecosystem services into economic data and monetary values. Maybe also I should say, I mentioned that this morning, that I'm actually a natural scientist by training, an ecologist. Over the years I've kind of learned to talk to economists, I guess, although even that is not easy because it depends very much what type of economist you talk to, what kind of answer you get to your questions. Also that is a developing field, just like the science of ecosystem services. The graph here shows the evolution of development of the publications on ecosystem services. You see it almost looks like a population graph. It's really exploding in the past 10-15 years. Especially after the release of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. I assume all of you know about it. If not, there is a website still in the air that shows all the results of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And just a year and a half ago, TEEP produced its final reports, and this graph goes until 2010. But the latest data that I saw just a few weeks ago, the next step of this graph shows that the trend just continues even steeper. Actually, it's off the slide now, the number of publications on ecosystem services. And all this activity in science also has made some inroads into policy making. And just a year and a half ago, at the COP10 of the Convention on Biodiversity, it was decided to establish the I2BS mechanism, and quite a few sessions here at the IUCN World Conservation Congress have been talking about this. So there is a lot going on in science and also more and more in policy, but actually the actual practice side, the real application in the field is still something that we need to work on, and of course IUCN is the ideal organization to bring science and policy together and working in practice. And maybe surprisingly there is still quite a paucity in data on the economic importance of ecosystems to our well-being. This graph here shows on the left-hand side 10 or 12 main ecosystem types, grasslands, woodlands, and between brackets you see the number of data points, studies that we used to make this graph. It shows the range of values for the total bundle of ecosystem services provided by these systems on a log scale. So you see the very wide range, which corresponds with the context, the socio-economic context, the actual and potential use of those ecosystem services. But it just gives you a feeling of the magnitude of the value that you speak of if you convert a system like that into a monofunctional system like plantations or shrimp farms. And for coral reefs, you see the widest range, which has to do with the fact that remote small reefs generate much fewer services and economic benefits than those located in, for example, the Caribbean, where millions of people go, and also have a lot of other economic services. Now you can use that information to come to kind of an average value of those ecosystem services. You should take these all as very rough estimates. The main message actually from these kind of meta-analysis is that still most of that value is not included in the market. It's all so-called shadow prices. Only some of those services like food provisioning or tourism are included in market pricing, but most of the other, mainly regulating services, the influence on water quality, air quality, erosion prevention, and most of those regulating services are not accounted for yet, but they are nevertheless real services that provide real benefits and value. And if you do not take them into account in the conversion, somebody is paying the price of the loss of those benefits in terms of lost productivity or livelihood loss and other real cost. In terms of those local situations where you have to make a choice between keeping your mangrove in your natural state or even restoring it to the original state, you're looking at a multifunctional system providing all those services which have kind of an average benefit of, in this case, $45,000 per hectare per year. Most of those systems are still being converted, especially mangroves are quite threatened systems turning into shrimp farms and crop growing and housing developments. And in that decision on moving it into a single functional use or in a multifunctional use, you are facing this dilemma that the perceived value of that system is often much lower than the actual value it is providing in terms of the social benefits that it is called. And a case study recently published in Nature from an area in Mexico illustrated that a recreational company bought part of the coastline for only $1,000 per hectare to be able to build hotels and other recreational developments. And in that same study it was calculated that the loss in terms of ecosystem services was $600,000 per hectare in terms of net present value. I think I briefly mentioned this issue of discounting, and that if you lose your ecosystem, you not only lose your annual benefits, but you also lose all the future benefits, actually part of the opportunity cost we also just discussed. And that is what you need to take into account when you convert your system into another ecosystem, a shrimp farm or a crop land. Studies that make that comparison in a rigorous way are still quite rare, and this slide shows 4 of them, comparing productive multifunctional use of wetlands, mangroves, and forests to turning them into farmland, shrimp farm, or logging. And you see that quite consistently the economic benefits of the multifunctional system are much higher than the converted system. If you again are honest about all the costs and benefits engaged in the transition. So, we are sitting here a little bit detached from our environment in this room. So I think it's good to show some pictures of nature that we are talking about and want to protect and really use it in a sustainable way. And with all these kind of studies, we demonstrate actually that conservation costs money, but it should actually be seen as an investment and not as a cost. Most governments still see the conservation budget as a cost, and cost naturally should be kept as low as possible. but more and more studies are showing that if you are honest about all those ecosystem services and investing in conservation and restoration gives you a very high return on your money and a much more secure return as well. Instead of putting it on a bank or speculating with it on the stock market, I think it is much better to spend your money on investing in conservation and restoration. We will be talking this afternoon about how you can approximate some of those ecosystem service values. I would like to draw your attention to this website now already. That's an organization called the Ecosystem Service Partnership. It has been founded 4 or 5 years ago now, and it's rapidly growing. An international community of, at the moment, still mainly scientists, but we want to reach out also to practitioners and policymakers. On the table there are a few handouts on that partnership and a few of the documents that we are producing. Okay, I would leave it at this point for now. I think it's time for lunch, but I'm happy to answer some questions, but maybe not so much about the evaluation.